I was on my way to the courtroom for my son's divorce from his wife. As I got into my car, a homeless little girl rushed up to me and said, "Ma'am, don't start the engine. Your daughter-in-law." I froze, but when I arrived at the courtroom safely, she went pale. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." My hands were shaking as I fumbled with my car keys in the courthouse parking lot. 65 years old, and I still felt like a nervous teenager when it came to family drama. Today was the day my son Dante would finally divorce Meadow, and honestly, I couldn't have been happier about it. Don't get me wrong, I tried to like her. For 3 years, I bit my tongue through countless dinners where she'd make snide comments about my cooking, my clothes, my outdated opinions. I smiled politely when she'd correct me in front of Dante, making me feel small and foolish in my own son's presence. But there was something about Meadow that always made my skin crawl, something calculating behind those perfectly applied false eyelashes. The parking lot was nearly empty at 8:30 in the morning. Court wouldn't start until 9, but I'd always been the type to arrive early. "Better safe than sorry," my mother used to say. I was fishing around in my purse for my reading glasses when I heard it. Ma'am, don't start the engine." I looked up to see a small figure running toward me across the asphalt. It was a little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with tangled brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. Her sneakers had holes in them, and she clutched a worn stuffed rabbit against her chest. "Don't start the car," she yelled again, breathless as she reached my window. I rolled it down, concerned. "Sweetie, what's wrong? Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The girl's eyes were wide with urgency. "Your daughter-in-law, Meadow. She did something to your car. Please don't start it." My blood turned to ice. "What did you say?" "She paid someone to mess with it, but my daddy said no. He said it was wrong." But she kept asking other people. The girl's words tumbled out in a rush. "I seen you before in the pictures she showed. You gotta believe me." I stared at this child, my mind reeling. How could a homeless little girl possibly know about Meadow? How did she even know who I was? "Honey, slow down," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was pounding. "What's your name? What pictures?" But the girl was already backing away, clutching her stuffed rabbit tighter. "I gotta go. My daddy don't know I came here. Just, please don't start the car, please." "Wait," I called out, but she was already running across the parking lot toward a cluster of trees at the far end. I watched her disappear into the shadows, leaving me sitting there with my mouth hanging open. I looked down at my keys, then at the ignition. The girl's words echoed in my head. "Meadow, she did something to your car. It was impossible. Ridiculous. Why would Meadow want to hurt me? I mean, sure, we didn't get along, but sabotaging my car? That was something out of a movie, not real life." But the fear in that little girl's eyes had been real. The urgency in her voice had been real. And she'd known Meadow's name. She'd known who I was. I sat there for what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes, staring at my keys. Finally, I made a decision. I got out of the car and walked around it slowly, looking for anything that seemed off. I wasn't exactly a mechanic, but I'd learned a thing or two from my late husband, Frank. Everything looked normal from the outside. The tires seemed fine, no visible damage to the bumpers or lights. I popped the hood, though I wasn't sure what I was looking for. The engine looked like it always did, a confusing mess of metal and wires that Frank used to understand, but that might as well have been written in ancient Greek for all I knew. A security guard from the courthouse was making his rounds and noticed me standing there with my hood up. "Having car trouble, ma'am?" I'm not sure," I said, feeling foolish. "A little girl told me not to start my car. Said someone had tampered with it." He raised an eyebrow. "What little girl?" I pointed toward the trees where she'd disappeared. She ran off that way. Brown hair, maybe 8 or 9 years old, carrying a stuffed rabbit. The guard looked puzzled. "I've been patrolling this lot for 2 hours. Haven't seen any children around here." That made my stomach clench even tighter. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was the stress of Dante's divorce finally getting to me? Would you like me to call someone to look at your car? The guard offered kindly. I glanced at my watch. It was already 8:50. Court would start in 10 minutes, and I needed to be there for Dante. Whatever was going on, I couldn't figure it out standing in a parking lot. No, thank you, I said, closing the hood. I'll deal with it later. The guard nodded and continued his patrol, but I could feel him watching me as I locked my car and walked toward the courthouse entrance. My mind was spinning with questions. Who was that little girl? How did she know about Meadow? And most importantly, had she been telling the truth? As I climbed the courthouse steps, I made a decision. I'd go through with today's proceedings, but afterward, I was going to get my car checked out. Better to feel foolish than end up dead if that child had been trying to save my life. The courthouse lobby was busy with people hurrying to various courtrooms. I spotted Dante near the information desk, looking handsome but tired in his navy suit. My heart ached for him. This divorce had been brutal, even though it was his idea. Meadow had fought him every step of the way, making demands that seemed designed more to hurt him than to reach a fair settlement. But it was what I saw next that made my blood run cold all over again. Meadow was standing near the elevator, and when she saw me walking through the entrance, her face went completely white. Not pale, white, like she'd seen a ghost. Our eyes met across the crowded lobby, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her features. Disappointment, shock, fear. It was gone so quickly I might have imagined it, but combined with the little girl's warning, it sent chills down my spine. Meadow quickly composed herself and turned away, but not before I caught her pulling out her phone and typing something frantically. Her whole body language had changed the moment she saw me alive and walking. Could it be true? Could that little girl have actually saved my life? The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt like an eternity. Meadow stood in the corner, her designer heels clicking nervously against the floor. She kept glancing at her phone, then at me, then back at her phone. I tried to make small talk about the weather, but she just gave me tight-lipped responses that barely qualified as words. Beautiful morning, isn't it? I ventured. Traffic wasn't too bad getting here. No. When we reached our floor, she practically sprinted out of the elevator ahead of me. I followed more slowly, my arthritis making me careful on the polished courthouse floors. By the time I reached the courtroom, Meadow was already huddled with her lawyer, whispering urgently. Dante waved me over to where he was sitting with his attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Chen who'd been handling the case for months. She'd warned us that Meadow's demands were unreasonable. She wanted half of everything, including the house Dante had owned before they were married, plus alimony that would have left him practically destitute. "How are you feeling, Mom?" Dante asked, squeezing my hand. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in weeks. This whole process had aged him 5 years. "I'm fine, honey. More importantly, how are you holding up?" He shrugged. "Ready for it to be over. Patricia thinks we have a good chance of the judge seeing through Meadow's demands." I nodded, but my attention kept drifting to Meadow across the courtroom. She was still on her phone, typing frantically. Every few seconds, she'd look over at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't the usual disdain I was used to seeing from her. This was something else entirely. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Martinez," the bailiff announced. As we stood, I watched Meadow stuff her phone into her purse like it was on fire. Her hands were actually trembling. I'd seen Meadow angry, manipulative, even cruel, but I'd never seen her nervous before. She was always so composed, so in control of every situation. Judge Martinez was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. She reviewed the case file briefly before addressing both parties. "This is a dissolution of marriage case between Dante Castellano and Meadow Castellano. I've reviewed the filings, and frankly, I have some concerns about the reasonableness of certain requests." Meadow's lawyer, a slick-looking man named Richard Steinberg, immediately stood up. "Your Honor, my client contributed significantly to the marriage and deserves fair compensation for her investment of time and emotional energy." Patricia Chen rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might fall out of her head. "Your Honor, Mrs. Castellano is requesting assets that predate the marriage, plus alimony that exceeds my client's actual income. These demands appear designed to punish rather than provide fair settlement. As the lawyers went back and forth, I kept watching Meadow. She seemed to be getting more agitated by the minute. She kept checking her phone despite her lawyer shooting her warning looks. At one point, she actually answered a call, holding the phone to her ear for just a few seconds before hanging up quickly. During a brief recess, I excused myself to use the restroom. The courthouse bathrooms were old but clean, with those automatic paper towel dispensers that never worked properly. As I was washing my hands, the door opened and Meadow walked in. We were alone for the first time all morning. "Lorna," she said, her voice strangely flat. "Hello, Meadow." She moved to the mirror next to me, pretending to check her lipstick, but I could see her watching me in the reflection. "You drove yourself here today?" It was an odd question. "Yes, of course. Same as always." "No problems with your car?" My heart started beating faster. Why was she asking about my car? "No problems at all." Meadow's reflection looked almost disappointed. "That's good. Cars can be so unreliable, especially older ones. You never know when something might go wrong." The way she said it made my skin crawl. It wasn't concern. It was something else entirely. Something that reminded me of the little girl's desperate warning. "My car runs fine," I said firmly. "Frank taught me to take good care of it." Meadow's mouth twitched. "Well, you can't be too careful. Accidents happen all the time, especially to people who don't see them coming." She left the bathroom before I could respond, leaving me standing there with soap still on my hands, my heart pounding. That hadn't been a casual conversation about car maintenance. That had been a threat. Or at the very least, a fishing expedition to see if I suspected anything. When I returned to the courtroom, I noticed Meadow was texting again. This time, she wasn't trying to hide it. Her thumbs were flying over the screen, and she looked frustrated, like whoever she was texting wasn't giving her the responses she wanted. The proceedings resumed, but I couldn't focus on what the lawyers were saying. My mind kept replaying the bathroom conversation and the little girl's warning. "Meadow, she did something to your car." The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that something was very wrong. During another break, I watched Meadow's behavior more carefully. She kept looking at the clock on the courtroom wall, then at her phone, then at me. It was like she was waiting for something to happen. Something that should have happened by now, but hadn't. Around 11:30, a man I'd never seen before approached Meadow's table. He was rough-looking, with grease stains on his shirt and calloused hands. A mechanic, I realized. He whispered something in Meadow's ear, and her face went completely white. She grabbed his arm and hissed something back at him that I couldn't hear, but her body language was furious. The man shrugged and walked away, leaving Meadow looking like she'd been slapped. That's when it clicked. The little girl had said her daddy told Meadow no, that he wouldn't do whatever she'd asked him to do. This must be the mechanic who'd refused to sabotage my car. And judging by Meadow's reaction, she'd been expecting me not to make it to court this morning. I felt sick to my stomach. How far was Meadow willing to go to get what she wanted? And more importantly, if she'd failed to stop me today, what would she try next? As we broke for lunch, I made a decision. I was going to find that little girl and get some answers. Because if Meadow was dangerous enough to try to hurt me once, she'd certainly try again. But first, I needed to call someone to look at my car. Better late than never. During the lunch break, I couldn't eat a thing. My stomach was churning with anxiety and fear. Instead of going to the courthouse cafeteria with Dante, I told him I needed some fresh air and walked back to the parking lot where this whole nightmare had started. I stood beside my car for a long time, staring at it like it might suddenly reveal its secrets. The little girl's words kept echoing in my head. She paid someone to mess with it, but my daddy said no. The grease-stained man who'd whispered to Meadow. The look of fury on her face when he'd delivered whatever news he'd brought. I pulled out my phone and called Mike's Auto Repair, the shop where Frank used to take our cars. Mike had been a friend of Frank's for 30 years, and he'd always been honest with us. "Mike, it's Lorna Castellano, Frank's wife." Lorna? How are you holding up, sweetheart? I heard about the divorce proceedings. Must be tough on you and Dante. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I need you to look at my car right away. I think someone might have tampered with it. There was a pause. Tampered with it? What makes you think that? I told him about the little girl's warning, feeling foolish even as the words came out of my mouth. But Mike didn't laugh or suggest I was being paranoid. Bring it over right now. I'll squeeze you in. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Mike's cramped office, watching through the window as he and his assistant examined my car with the hood up. The garage smelled like motor oil and coffee, familiar scents that reminded me of Frank. He used to love coming here, talking shop with Mike about engines and carburetors. After about 30 minutes, Mike came back inside, his face grim. Lorna, someone definitely messed with your car. They loosened the brake lines just enough that they would have failed completely within the first few miles of driving. Probably would have happened when you tried to stop at the first red light. My hands started shaking. Are you saying I could have been killed? At the very least, seriously injured. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't some random vandalism. This was meant to cause an accident. I felt like I was going to be sick. Can you fix it? Already did. But Lorna, you need to call the police. This is attempted murder. The words hit me like a physical blow. Attempted murder. Someone, Meadow, had actually tried to kill me. Over a divorce settlement. Over money and pride and whatever twisted psychology drove her to think she could eliminate obstacles to getting what she wanted. There's something else, Mike said quietly. A woman came by here 3 days ago, asking if I'd be willing to do some work on a car. Off the books, if you know what I mean. She had pictures of you and your car. My breath caught. What did she look like? Blonde, pretty, dressed real fancy, had this way of talking like she was used to getting whatever she wanted. When I told her I don't do that kind of work, she got nasty real quick. Started offering me more and more money. How much money? Started at $500. By the time she left, she was up to $2,000. Mike shook his head in disgust. Some people think everything's for sale. $2,000. Meadow had been willing to pay $2,000 to have me killed or seriously injured. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Did she give you a name? Called herself Mary, but I could tell it was fake. Everything about her felt fake, you know? Like she was playing a part. I thought about the grease-stained man who'd approached Meadow in court. Did she ask you to recommend anyone else? Mike's expression grew even more troubled. Yeah, she did. I told her I didn't know anybody who'd do work like that, but... He hesitated. But what? There's a guy named Tony Brennan who runs a chop shop on the other side of town. Real shady character. Word is he'll do just about anything if the price is right. I wouldn't put it past her to try him next. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. Meadow had approached multiple mechanics, shopping around for someone willing to sabotage my car. When Mike refused, she'd found Tony Brennan. But apparently, even he had drawn the line at attempted murder. The little girl who warned me, I said suddenly. She said her daddy told Meadow no. Could Tony Brennan have a daughter? Mike nodded grimly. He does. Sweet little thing, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Her name's Emma. Her mother died a few years back, and Tony's been raising her alone. Despite everything else wrong with the guy, he loves that little girl more than life itself. Emma, the brave little girl who'd saved my life, had a name. And she'd risked getting in trouble with her father to warn a complete stranger. I need to find her, I said. I need to thank her. Lorna, you need to be careful. If Meadow was willing to pay someone to kill you once, she'll try again. And Tony Brennan, decent father or not, runs with some dangerous people. But I was already making plans. I needed to talk to Emma, to understand exactly what she'd overheard. And more importantly, I needed evidence. Because going to the police with a story about a homeless little girl's warning wasn't going to be enough to stop Meadow. As I drove back to the courthouse in my newly repaired car, my mind was racing. The divorce proceedings seemed almost trivial now compared to the fact that my daughter-in-law had tried to have me murdered. But I couldn't tell Dante. Not yet. He was already devastated by the divorce. Learning that his wife was a would-be killer might destroy him completely. No, I needed to handle this carefully. I needed proof, and I needed to make sure Meadow never got another chance to hurt me or anyone else. When I walked back into the courtroom, Meadow looked up from her phone with obvious surprise. For just a moment, her mask slipped completely, and I saw pure rage flash across her face before she composed herself again. She'd been expecting me to be dead or in the hospital by now. Instead, here I was, walking in like nothing had happened. I met her gaze steadily across the courtroom, and for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't the one who looked away first. Judge Martinez reconvened the afternoon session, but I barely heard what the lawyers were saying. I was too busy watching Meadow, studying her every expression, every gesture. Now that I knew what she was capable of, I could see the calculation behind everything she did. During another brief recess, she approached me directly. "You're looking well, Lorna," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I was worried when you were late getting back from lunch." "Just had to run a quick errand," I replied pleasantly. "Car maintenance. You know how important it is to keep everything in working order." Her smile faltered for just a moment. "Of course. Safety first." "Exactly. You never know what might happen if someone's been messing with things they shouldn't." This time, there was no mistaking the flash of anger in her eyes. She knew that I knew, and I knew that she knew that I knew. The game had changed completely. That evening, after the court session ended with no resolution, the judge had postponed the final decision until the following week. I couldn't stop thinking about Emma and her father Tony. I needed to find them, but I wasn't about to go wandering around a dangerous part of town by myself at my age. Instead, I called my nephew Marcus, who worked as a private investigator. If anyone could help me navigate this situation safely, it would be him. "Aunt Lorna? Is everything okay? You sound shaken up." I told him everything: the little girl's warning, the sabotaged brakes, Meadow's behavior in court. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Jesus, Aunt Lorna, you could have been killed." "I know. But Marcus, I think there's more to this than just Meadow wanting me out of the way for the divorce. Her behavior today. It was like she was waiting for something bigger to happen." "What do you mean?" I thought about Meadow's constant phone checking, her nervous energy, the way she'd looked almost panicked when that mechanic had whispered to her. I think the divorce might just be the beginning of whatever she's planning. Maybe she figured if I was gone, she'd have more leverage over Dante somehow. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I can look into Tony Brennan for you, see what his story is, find out where he lives. But Aunt Lorna, if this woman is as dangerous as you think, maybe you should consider getting some protection. I can't tell Dante about this yet. He's already been through so much." "I'm not talking about Dante. I'm talking about the police." "With what evidence? A little girl's word against a woman who's been playing the victim for months? Marcus, you know how these things go. Meadow's beautiful, well-spoken, and has an expensive lawyer. I'm just the bitter mother-in-law who never liked her." He sighed because he knew I was right. "Give me 24 hours. I'll see what I can dig up on both Meadow and this Tony character." The next morning, I was having coffee in my kitchen when Marcus called back. "Aunt Lorna, you need to sit down for this." "I'm already sitting." "Tony Brennan has a daughter named Emma, just like you thought. But here's where it gets interesting. I did some digging into his finances, and 3 days ago, someone deposited $5,000 into his bank account. Cash deposit, $5,000. More than double what she'd offered Mike." "So he did take the job?" That's what I thought at first. But then I kept digging. Yesterday, the same day as your court hearing, Tony deposited another $15,000. $20,000 total, Aunt Lorna. That's not car sabotage money. That's something much bigger. My blood ran cold. What could she possibly want that would cost $20,000? "I think you need to ask Emma." Because Tony Brennan reported to work yesterday morning like nothing unusual was happening. Whatever Meadow paid him that money for, it wasn't just about your car. That afternoon, Marcus picked me up in his beat-up sedan. He'd located Tony Brennan's address, a rundown apartment complex on the east side of town, the kind of place where people minded their own business and asked no questions. Emma gets home from school around 3:30, Marcus said as we waited in the parking lot. Her dad doesn't get off work until 6. If we're going to talk to her alone, this is our window. At 3:45, I spotted her, the same tangled brown hair, the same worn clothes, but without the desperate urgency I'd seen in the courthouse parking lot. She was walking slowly, clutching a backpack that looked too big for her small frame. "Emma?" I called out softly as she approached the apartment building. She froze, then turned toward my voice. When she saw me, her eyes went wide. "You didn't start the car," she whispered. "No, honey, I didn't. Thanks to you." I got out of Marcus's car slowly, not wanting to frighten her. "Can we talk? I want to thank you properly for saving my life." She looked around nervously. "My daddy said I wasn't supposed to talk to nobody about nothing." "Emma, I'm not here to get you or your daddy in trouble. But I think that lady who came to see him might be planning to hurt more people. Can you help me stop her?" She chewed on her lower lip, a gesture that reminded me painfully of Dante when he was her age, and trying to decide whether to confess to some childhood misdeed. "She was real mean," Emma said finally. "When Daddy told her he wouldn't hurt you, she got all red in the face and started yelling." "What did she say?" "She said if he wouldn't do the car thing, then he better be ready to do the other thing, or she'd tell the police he was stealing cars." Emma's voice got smaller. "Daddy does fix stolen cars sometimes, but only because we need the money for food and stuff." My heart ached for this little girl, caught between her father's illegal activities and a dangerous woman's threats. "What was the other thing, Emma?" She looked around again, then motioned for me to come closer. When I knelt down to her level, she whispered, "She wants Daddy to take your son somewhere. Make it look like an accident, but not kill him. Just hurt him real bad so he can't think good anymore." The world tilted around me. Meadow wasn't just planning to kill me. She was planning to have Dante seriously injured, possibly brain damaged, so she could control him completely. With me dead and Dante incapacitated, she'd have access to everything. His money, his business, his entire life. "When is this supposed to happen?" I managed to ask through the buzzing in my ears. "Tomorrow night. When he goes to that place, he always goes on Thursday nights. Dante's poker game. Every Thursday for the past 10 years, he'd met with the same group of guys at a private club downtown. It was his one escape from the stress of work and his crumbling marriage. Meadow would know exactly where he'd be and when." "Emma, does your daddy know this is wrong?" She nodded, tears starting to fall. "He cried when the mean lady left. He said he never wanted to hurt nobody, but if he doesn't do what she says, she'll make sure he goes to jail and I'll have to go live with strangers." The pure evil of it took my breath away. Meadow was using a child's love for her father to force him into committing assault. She'd found Tony's weakness, his devotion to Emma, and was exploiting it ruthlessly. "Emma, what if I told you there was a way to keep your daddy safe and stop the mean lady from hurting anyone?" Her tear-stained face looked up at me hopefully. "Really? Really? But I'm going to need you to be very brave, and I'm going to need your daddy's help." As I explained my plan to Emma, I felt a cold determination settling over me. Meadow had made a fatal error. She'd underestimated the power of a mother's love, both mine for Dante and Tony's for Emma. She was about to learn that some bonds couldn't be broken, no matter how much money you threw at them. That evening, I sat in my living room staring at my phone for nearly an hour before I finally worked up the courage to make the call. I'd spent the afternoon with Marcus, working out every detail of what needed to happen. Tony Brennan had agreed to meet with us after Emma convinced him that cooperation was his only way out of this nightmare. Tony turned out to be nothing like I'd expected. Yes, he was rough around the edges, with calloused hands and grease permanently embedded under his fingernails. But when he talked about Emma, his whole face softened. He was a man who'd made bad choices to survive, not because he enjoyed hurting people. "I never wanted to get mixed up in something like this," he'd told me, his voice thick with shame. But when she threatened to turn me in, and I thought about Emma ending up in foster care, he'd shaken his head. "I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, but I've never hurt an innocent person. Not until now." "You're not going to hurt anyone," I'd assured him. "But I need you to call Meadow and tell her you'll do exactly what she wants." Now, at 8 o'clock on Wednesday evening, I was about to call Meadow myself. My hands were trembling as I dialed her number. Lorna? She sounded surprised to hear from me. Is everything all right? I was wondering if we could meet for coffee tomorrow morning. Before court. There was a pause. That's unexpected. Why? I've been thinking about everything that's happened between us over the years. I know we've had our differences, but with the divorce almost final, maybe it's time we cleared the air. Another pause. Longer this time. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out what angle I was playing. Where did you have in mind? That little cafe on 5th Street near the courthouse. Say, 8:30? All right, I'll see you there. After I hung up, I called Marcus. It's set. She agreed to meet me. Are you sure about this, Aunt Lorna? Once you confront her, there's no going back. I'm sure. Meadow needs to know that her plan has failed, and she needs to understand that I'm not going to let her hurt Dante. What if she tries to hurt you? In a public cafe at 8:30 in the morning? I don't think even Meadow is that reckless. But as I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, I wondered if I was being naive. A woman who would pay $20,000 to have her husband brain damaged was capable of anything. The next morning, I arrived at Cafe Luna 15 minutes early. I chose a table near the window where we'd be visible to anyone passing by, ordered a coffee I didn't want, and waited. Meadow walked in exactly on time, looking as perfectly put together as always. Designer jeans, silk blouse, jewelry that probably cost more than most people made in a month. She spotted me immediately and glided over with that fake smile I'd grown to despise. Lorna, you look tired. Are you feeling all right? I'm fine. Just haven't been sleeping well lately. She sat down across from me, ordering a skinny vanilla latte from the waitress. I have to admit, I was curious about why you wanted to meet. We don't exactly have heart-to-heart conversations. No, we don't. But I thought it was time we were honest with each other. Something flickered in her eyes. Honest about what? I took a sip of my coffee, gathering my courage. About what you really want, Meadow, and what you're willing to do to get it. Her smile didn't waver, but her grip tightened on her coffee cup. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you do. I leaned forward slightly. I know about Tony Brennan. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. For a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped completely, and I saw the real Meadow underneath, cold, calculating, and absolutely ruthless. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. $20,000, Meadow. That's a lot of money to pay someone for automotive work. She set her coffee cup down with shaking hands. You're fishing. You don't know anything. I know you tried to have my brakes sabotaged. I know you threatened Tony with exposure if he didn't help you. And I know about your plan for tomorrow night. Meadow's breathing became shallow and rapid. She looked around the cafe like a trapped animal searching for an escape route. Even if any of that were true, she said carefully, it would be your word against mine. And who's going to believe the bitter mother-in-law over the grieving soon-to-be ex-wife? Emma Brennan would believe me. She's the one who warned me about my car. Sweet little girl. Very observant. She heard every word of your conversation with her father. Meadow's face went completely white. She's a child. Children make things up. Not this child. She's got an excellent memory for details. Like how you threatened to destroy her father's life if he didn't help you hurt Dante. You don't understand, Meadow hissed, her composure finally cracking. Dante was never supposed to divorce me. I had plans. I invested 3 years of my life in that marriage, and I'm not walking away with nothing. So you decided to make sure he couldn't walk away either. Her laugh was bitter and ugly. He would have been taken care of. I'm not a monster, Lorna. I would have made sure he had the best medical care, the best rehabilitation. But he would have needed me to make decisions for him, to manage his affairs. The casual way she talked about destroying my son's life made my stomach turn. You would have controlled everything. I would have had what I deserve. Her voice rose, causing other cafe patrons to glance in our direction. She caught herself and lowered her voice again. Do you have any idea what it's like to be married to someone who's so devoted to his mommy that he can't see what's right in front of him? What's right in front of him is a woman who tried to kill his mother and planned to have him beaten into brain damage. Meadow's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration and rage. None of this was supposed to happen. Tony was supposed to take care of your car. You were supposed to have your little accident, and Dante would have turned to me for comfort. But that man didn't have the stomach for it. Because he's a better person than you gave him credit for. He's a criminal. Yes, but he draws the line at murder. Unlike some people. Meadow wiped her eyes, smearing her perfect makeup. What do you want? I want you to call Tony Brennan right now and tell him the job is canceled. All of it. And if I don't? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. Then I pressed send on this text message to Detective Sarah Morrison of the Metro Police Department. She's an old friend of my late husband's, very interested in cases involving attempted murder and conspiracy to commit assault. Meadow stared at the phone, then at me. You're bluffing. Try me. We sat in silence for nearly a full minute, engaged in a battle of wills that had been building for 3 years. Finally, Meadow reached for her purse and pulled out her own phone. Tony, it's Mary. The job we discussed is off, all of it. She paused, listening. I don't care about the money. Just forget we ever talked. She hung up and glared at me with pure hatred. There. Are you satisfied? Almost. There's one more thing. What? You're going to accept whatever settlement the judge offers tomorrow. No appeals, no further negotiations. You're going to take what you can get and disappear from our lives forever. And if I don't? I leaned back in my chair, feeling calmer than I had in days. Then I send that text message, and you spend the next 10 to 20 years in prison explaining to your cellmates why you tried to murder a 65-year-old grandmother. Meadow's hands were shaking as she gathered her things. You think you've won, but this isn't over. Yes, it is, I said quietly. Because if you ever come near my son or me again, if you ever try to contact us or threaten us in any way, I won't hesitate to destroy you. And unlike you, I don't need to pay criminals to do my dirty work. She stood up so quickly she knocked over her chair, drawing stares from the other customers. Without another word, she stalked out of the cafe, leaving me sitting alone with my cold coffee and the satisfaction of knowing I'd just saved my son's life. But I wasn't naive enough to think Meadow would give up easily. I had one more call to make. The final court hearing took place on Friday morning. I arrived early as usual, but this time I wasn't nervous. I was prepared for whatever Meadow might try to pull. She walked into the courtroom looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Her usual perfect makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she took her seat next to her lawyer. When Judge Martinez called the session to order, Meadow's attorney immediately requested a conference with the court. Your Honor, my client would like to revise her settlement demands. Judge Martinez raised an eyebrow. At this late stage? That's highly unusual, Mr. Steinberg. Yes, Your Honor, but circumstances have changed. Mrs. Castellano is now willing to accept a much more reasonable arrangement. I watched as Meadow's lawyer outlined a settlement that gave her almost nothing, just enough to cover her immediate moving expenses and a small amount for 6 months of temporary support. It was less than what Dante had originally offered before the proceedings turned nasty. Dante looked confused. Patricia, what's happening? Why is she suddenly being reasonable? His lawyer whispered something to him, but I could see the bewilderment on his face. He'd been expecting another battle, not an unconditional surrender. Judge Martinez reviewed the new terms quickly. Mr. Castellano, do you find these terms acceptable? Yes, Your Honor. Very acceptable. Then I'll sign the order. This divorce is finalized. Just like that, it was over. 3 years of marriage, months of bitter legal battles, and it ended with a whimper rather than a bang. As we gathered our things to leave, Meadow approached Dante one last time. I tensed, ready to intervene if necessary, but her words surprised me. I'm sorry, Dante, for everything. I know I haven't been the wife you deserved. Dante looked at her with a mixture of sadness and relief. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Meadow. I really do. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered Emma's frightened face and Tony's anguished confession about what Meadow had asked him to do to my son. Meadow left the courthouse without looking back. I never saw her again. That afternoon, Dante and I went to lunch at our favorite Italian restaurant. The same place we'd gone to celebrate his college graduation, his first job, his engagement. But this time, we were celebrating his freedom. I can't believe it's really over, he said, twirling pasta around his fork. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sometimes things just work out the way they're supposed to, I said carefully. Mom, can I ask you something? My heart skipped a beat. Of course. Did you ever suspect that Meadow was, I don't know, planning something? These last few weeks she seemed different, more desperate. I chose my words carefully. I think she was scared of losing everything she thought she was entitled to. Fear makes people do desperate things. Dante nodded thoughtfully. I'm just glad it's over. I want to start fresh, you know? Maybe travel a little, focus on work, spend more time with you. I'd like that very much. A week later, I was doing laundry when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Emma standing on my porch, holding her stuffed rabbit and wearing a clean dress that actually fit her properly. Hi, Mrs. Lorna, she said shyly. Emma, what a wonderful surprise. How are you, sweetheart? Good. Daddy wanted me to give you this. She held out a folded piece of paper. I opened it to find a handwritten note from Tony. Mrs. Castellano, I can't begin to thank you for giving me and Emma a second chance. I've decided to go legitimate. Got a job at Mike's Auto Repair starting Monday. Emma wanted to thank you in person for being so kind to us. We won't forget what you did. Tony Brennan. Your daddy got a new job? Emma nodded eagerly. He says we're gonna be okay now, and he says you're an angel. I knelt down to her level. You're the angel, Emma. You saved my life. Daddy says sometimes doing the right thing is scary, but you gotta do it anyway. Your daddy is a very wise man. Emma hugged me tightly, her small arms wrapping around my neck. I'm glad you didn't start your car that day. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. After Emma left, I sat in my garden with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in 3 years, I felt truly at peace. My phone rang, interrupting my quiet moment. It was Marcus. Aunt Lorna, I thought you'd want to know. Meadow left town yesterday. Bought a one-way ticket to Phoenix. Doesn't look like she's planning to come back. That's probably for the best. There's something else. I kept digging into her background after everything that happened. Turns out, you and Dante weren't her first victims. My blood chilled. What do you mean? She was married once before, about 10 years ago. Husband died in a suspicious car accident 6 months after she took out a big life insurance policy on him. The investigation was inconclusive, but the insurance company never paid out. I closed my eyes, feeling sick. So she's done this before. Looks like it. The good news is she's gone now and she knows you're onto her. I don't think she'll risk coming back. After I hung up, I sat in my garden for a long time, thinking about how close Dante and I had come to disaster. If not for one brave little girl with a strong moral compass, I might be dead, and Dante might be fighting for his life in a hospital bed. The next Thursday evening, Dante called to cancel his poker game. I was thinking maybe we could have dinner instead, just the two of us. I feel like I haven't really talked to you in months. I'd love that, honey. Great. How about I pick you up at 6? We can go to that steakhouse you like. As I got ready for dinner, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I looked older than I had a month ago. The stress of everything had left its mark, but my eyes were clear and peaceful in a way they hadn't been for years. I'd protected my son without him ever knowing he'd been in danger. I'd helped a troubled man choose the right path for himself and his daughter, and I'd proven to myself that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. During dinner, Dante talked about his plans for the future, his relief at being free from a toxic marriage, his gratitude for having me in his life. He had no idea how close he'd come to losing everything, and I intended to keep it that way. Some secrets were worth keeping when they protected the people you loved. As we drove home that night, I thought about Emma and her stuffed rabbit, about Tony choosing his daughter's future over easy money, about the ripple effects of one small act of courage. Sometimes the most important battles are fought in silence, won not with grand gestures but with quiet determination and the refusal to let evil triumph. I had won this battle, and for the first time in 3 years, I could sleep peacefully knowing my family was safe, Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.